THA Talks, for free thought and open minds.
And for freedom of speech.
Hello, I'm Paul Lobatelli and welcome to another edition of THA Talks, the alternative podcast show from the UK. Our talks include news, conspiracy, spirituality, the occult, science, history, art, philosophy, religion and much more. If you'd like to check out our full archive, just go to www.thatalks.com to listen to or to download all our free content. And if there's anyone who'd like to contact us and give us some feedback, maybe you'd like to recommend a guest for the show, you can email us info@thatalks.com or go to our website and contact us via the contact tab there. And don't forget, you can subscribe to the show via our RSS feed, and you can also find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube and many other podcast directories out there. Well, hello everyone, thanks for tuning in again. It's been a while since I've done another show, just been really busy and a lot of things going on in the country that's been really busy. However, we have been knocking out some THA Thoughts articles on our website, so if you want to check them out, we've got another one going up today from John White, who'll probably go up about the same time as this show. So we've been doing that, and I mean, things have been pretty crazy in the UK. We've had a lot of threats back and forth from Russia, which personally I think most of the country just don't buy it. I mean, it's not that they don't think that it's at all possible that Russia have done this somehow. It's just the limited information and the demand from our government that we just trust them, whatever they say. I mean, apparently Russia have asked for a sample of this stuff that killed this ex-Russian spy, this nerve gas, and that they're accusing Russia of carrying out on here on UK soil. And it's just the same old story of limited information. And we've just been here so many times where there's just been such illogical and unreasonable goings on that have led to wars and stuff that we just really don't want to finance anymore or be behind or see happen and see the loss of so much life again. I'm not saying it's getting that bad with Russia now, but it's certainly something that's just seems to be knocking on that door. They seem to be have this fantasy of just making the Russians out to be these demons. And I think most of the people here in the UK, I really do think most of the people have a little bit of respect for Putin. They may not trust him completely, but they respect him. So that's going to be interesting. And we've got an article coming out on that. And I'm sure we're going to be covering that one as it unfolds, because we've certainly not heard the last of that. We've also had journalists being banned from the UK. A few journalists from a group called Generation Identity, which are a European identity. Obviously, that means they're Nazis, so they're barred from the UK. Also, Lauren Southern was barred, a libertarian, conservative, independent journalist. I mean, she may irritate a few people because she doesn't have the same views as you, but a threat to the UK, seriously? You know, it's seriously getting like the Soviet Union here now, where the censorship is hitting the internet. It's starting to, and we're getting banned journalists, and it's worrying times. And we've had people standing at Speaker's Corner today. There was a huge turnout supporting Tommy Robinson, who was, again, whatever you think of him, he's got a perfectly reasonable argument here that free speech is under threat in this country at the moment. It's just pigeon steps to it, and it's very concerning. And I'm sure we're going to be covering this subject on today's show. Where before we go there, I think I should just go and grab that Mr. Reverend David Parry. How you doing, David?
Oh, Paul, it won't be easy. You'll think it's strange when I try to explain how I feel, that I still need your love after all that I've done. So I chose freedom. Freedom, of course, is the link with tonight's show. Reverend, thank you. Good evening, Mr. Lobatelli. How are you?
How are you doing? I was going to say it's been a while since you've been on the show, but it's been a while since I've blooming done a show because I've been so busy recently. But we have been knocking out some articles and stuff, and I'm sure you're going to be contributing to that at some stage this year as well. So it's good that there's been just a bit more balance. So rather than us not release shows for a while, at least we can release content of what we're thinking, what we're up to, and just keeping our website alive and stuff. But it's all free, so you know.
Yeah, I mean that's the whole point. I mean, our lovely listeners point blank refuse to put their hands in their pockets. So it's all done gratis. I mean, what can they expect? We love doing the shows. We love them all. But hey, we've got lives as well.
Yeah, and we've got some interesting guests lined up. So that's we're going to be firing some out over the next few weeks or so. But also, I mean, I hate to keep bringing up them for the promotion, but we've apparently Hope Not Hate have been on the case again, and this time apparently you're struggling for guests for the Free Speech Club, David. Is that correct?
Well, no. I've actually just written an email to Mr. Lowes. Was it Lowless? Lowlife? I mean, I'm absolutely shocked to find my name even mentioned as a lifelong libertarian. I mean, libertarians go to the Liberal Party, so that shows how informed their researchers, if that's the word I'm really using, have gone into all of this. It was not only a shock to be alerted that my name was there. I mean, as a lifelong left-leaning libertarian, I actually find it extraordinary that's how far people are trying to close down debate at the moment.
Well, they don't care. I don't think they care what political affiliation you are. If you either do two things, even if you defend a form of nationalism in some way, that you have a nationalistic ideology of any of your thoughts, or you give people a platform that does, then you are a Nazi, basically, or you are a potential Nazi. And I'm beginning to doubt. I'm beginning to be suspicious of the alt-right movement in regards to this. In terms, it seems to be a way to collectively push all that together and to call it alt-light, alt-right, and it's all this menacing way of thinking. And you sort of club it all together, and then it permits you to call them all Nazis and attack them. You know, it's. I'm getting suspicious of that. Not that I'm attacking the movement in itself in that way, but in terms of, I worry of case it's been created for that reason to attack people.
Well, Paul, I mean, anyone that knows me knows I'm not a nationalist of any description, but I'm completely against no platform. Unless people speak their minds, there will never be a resolution to any social or cultural conflicts on any level. Excuse me. We simply have to debate. There's no way forward. You know, it's better jaw than war. I can't really see another way around it. I mean, recently I was accused of adding carte blanche freedom into my defence of free speech. In other words, libel, slander. No, that's not what free speech means. We're not talking about criminal activities. We're talking about the free and open expression of people's points of view. It's as simple as that. And when journalists are being barred from the country and people are clearly looking for excuses to censor social media, we're in very, very dangerous times, including the new guidelines for hate crimes that have been delivered to the police. They're so wide. The goal is so wide. The parameters are so wide that it's difficult to know what they couldn't include in that if they really wanted to.
Well, I mean, yeah, absolutely, totally. From my perspective, I am a nationalist. I'd say I have nationalistic ways politically, the way I look at the world, and I believe the world is flooded with conspiracy. So I regard myself as a conspiracy theorist as well, because there's so many. Although I'm a bit more diplomatic than most, I'd like to think. But the main reason why I'd say I'm a nationalist is because I don't think anyone's got a right to take that away from people. I mean, nationalism is just literally a natural human environment, which they've always been in. They've always had grown into groups and stuff. And I'm not saying that globalism can't be the next step in evolution for humanity, but certainly not when in the way that you destroy what was there before. Progression, you need to climb on top of what was there before and progress, respecting where you've come from and thriving off it and improving it, not destroying it, hating it, and creating this thing that most, even if half the people hate it, it's wrong, you know. So, but anyway, I'm sure we can natter on all.
Let me jump in there because it's important things. I mean, the fact we don't agree on certain things has never stood in the way. That's being responsible and mature as human beings. Also, we debate things. What on earth is wrong with that? The minute that is closed down, we have a problem. And we're beginning to get to territories that are very, very problems politically. And if we're not careful, we'll all be in the slammer quicker than we ever thought, and for no good reason at all. As I said before, make sure it's your side that's winning if you're closing down free speech, because you'll soon find yourself in a gulag if it's not.
Absolutely, yeah, and we must crack on now with today's guest. We're going to be speaking with Andrew Withers. Now, Andrew, he used to be the leader of the Libertarian Party UK. Is he still the leader, or is he still actually in the Libertarian Party UK?
Well, I mean, we're all in the Libertarian Party. I mean, I used to be the press secretary, but I'm not now, because we all believe, in turnover. We believe in new blood and giving people new experiences. So Adam was certainly a very capable leader in the past. No, it's young Adam now who's the leader, but, Andrew and I keep, as the elders of the tribe, keep a healthy eye on everything. And of course, we're active in the movement. He's a good friend to this show. He's a good friend to the Free Speech Club, and has appeared on the show and spoken at the Free Speech Club. So, I think he's got a lot to say about current trends as they get increasingly dark and worrying.
Right. Okay, well, I think we should crack straight on then.
Let's get on with it, my dear. Good evening, Andrew Withers, and welcome yet again to THA Talks.
Oh, good evening. I hope you can hear me now.
I hope this interview gets ahead. The powers of darkness, or dare I say the political elite, are trying to stop us discussing freedom, Andrew, but it's always a pleasure to be chin-wagging about this essential subject with your good self.
Okay.
Well, I mean, we're both lifelong libertarians. All I can see in front of me is the increasing polarisation of British politics. I'm not sure what's going on, and I'm not sure why. I mean, what's your take on the current shameless attack upon liberty and freedom?
I think we need to actually sort of track back probably about 2 years, and you knew I was going to say that, being a historian. I have to say that I actually remember the morning of the Brexit vote referendum being taken, and the palpable shock on the faces of people in the BBC. And I have to say that nice Mr. Farage also had actually thrown in the towel before the results had actually been declared, that the Westminster bubble really hadn't actually got its head round the sheer level of anger that there was about what has been going on for probably about the last 30 years. So literally, you've actually got Westminster, you've actually got the civil service who are blatantly campaigning to actually stay in the EU, much against their reason for being, really. They're supposed to be an independent body that implements the power of Parliament. Parliament seems to have just let them have free rein over the last 30, 40 years, to the point where Sir Jeremy Haywood has actually carried out a palace coup in combining both the role of Cabinet Secretary and head of the civil service. Without going into too fine a detail, but Steve Hilton, who was a former political advisor to David Cameron, locked horns with Jeremy Haywood. And literally for Cameron, it came down to a choice between having a very intelligent, forward-looking policy advisor and somebody who effectively was appointed by the Queen, actually sits around the cabinet table, is there purely on the basis of probably about 14 or 15 mandarins, and the palpable shock on the faces of these people had to be seen to be believed. They just couldn't believe it. Then we actually then ran through all of the usual insults. We were all too stupid, we were all too thick, we were all too racist, even though some of us have been campaigning from the libertarian side to have a reduced state, not to join a super state, for going back to 10, 15 years. Once they actually got through the insult stage, they then have started to take action. And literally where we're at now is closing down the debate. The most outrageous attacks on libertarian groups. I think King's College London tried to have a talk between a classical liberal and somebody who was a libertarian, and that was attacked by Antifa, and there's no other way of actually calling it. And we have to call them terrorists today. I've just been reading Die Welt from Thuringia in Germany, and where there is a red-green Lander government, where they've just found 250 pounds of chemicals to make high explosives. The sad thing in all of this is that this group, which links itself to Antifa, is actually also linked to the regional government. So literally, we're actually having a complete blowback from what was an overt rebellion in 2016 to the point now where we're actually seeing anybody who speaks against government policy. And this is very disturbing when you've actually got a government that's allegedly conservative is actually supporting these groups. And I use the word supporting advisedly in actually breaking up any sort of dissent. I never thought I'd actually see the day where journalists would be excluded from this country. And I was a bit concerned about the legality of this. And certainly we are entitled to free speech if you're a citizen of this country. But under an act of 1919, you can exclude aliens from coming here and stirring up dissent and all sorts of other problems. So literally, they've actually gone into this in quite some detail and hacking back to a law that is 100 years old. I warned at least 300 years ago, if they didn't stop this, 300 years ago, did I say that? 3 years ago, I actually warned if they actually overturn Brexit, which is the vote of the people, even though our constitution just consists of 3 words, Parliament is sovereign. And I think Lord Lawson was one of the people who I saw in the House of Lords, said if they try and overturn this popular vote, which was the largest vote in English and British history, the country will be rendered ungovernable. And we're on that slippery slope. And I don't think this government under, I keep on calling the vicar's daughter, and I shouldn't, because that's very rude and very disrespectful. But at the end of the day, she has not got control of her own party. She certainly hasn't got control of Parliament, and she's lashing out at the rest of us. And I'll be honest, she's subverting what most people in this country actually feel is one of their birthrights, free speech. So having dragged the longest answer to your question out that I could possibly, I'll throw it back to you, David.
Well, no, it was a fine answer, Andrew. I mean, have you heard about the new police guidelines issued recently? Was it today? About, think twice before you open your mouth, because now anything can be considered a hate crime. I mean, have you read the sort of missives on that? Anything
the
to
last
say?
thing I read about hate crime was a book called 1984 by George Orwell. And literally, I actually quoted that in something I was writing yesterday. I mean, literally, they're actually treating the book 1984 as a handbook, as a manual, not a warning. And literally, stop crime or stop think was part of this, is to stop crime happening and people thinking about stuff that they shouldn't be thinking of, is actually to preempt it by closing down free speech. And literally, if you ever remember the excellent film that was actually produced in the 80s, the 2-minute hate seems to be something that is actually coming more and more prevalent in our press, our media. And I'll be honest, I've actually, as a lifelong news junkie, I've actually given up watching the BBC. I don't like watching the Ministry of Truth, and I'm celebrating my 8-week anniversary of not watching anything on the BBC, because it's just become so overt, I can't stomach it anymore.
I'm getting worried. I mean, what's your view on the sort of no platform stance that so many people are adopting?
And do you think that had anything to do with the recent Rees-Mogg incident?
No, I think it all predates that. I mean, I'm old enough to remember no platforming coming out of the 1970s when I was at university. I mean, a lot of this stuff is, American imports. You've got a lot of Americans who can't get a job in the state education system in the States, so they come over here with their trendy, groovy ideas. And I'm sorry, I'm actually probably going to be a little bit controversial. There's virtually everything that comes out that's being mocked in the press with transgender identity politics can all be traced back to university campuses either in California or on the east coast of the States. And I saw this when I was at university as a young man of 18, about 10 years ago. Am I going to get away with that?
You are going to get away with that because you're one of our favourite guests. I can understand why this country is being driven to such an extent by American political issues. I mean, liberty for me.
Have always considered us as what George Orwell called as airstrip one, if you remember from your English literature. They've always considered us to be the 51st state. And you've actually got an awful lot of people in this country who actually do perceive themselves as the 51st state. I have never seen so many English, Scottish, Welsh and Ulster people expending so much energy on their hatred of what in effect is a foreign leader, Mr. Donald Trump, who we have no influence over one way or the other. We certainly haven't got a vote in their elections. But the anguish and the pain that they expend on social media, in the press, it's just going back to what I was saying, the 2-minute hate. Mm. America since 1780 has been a foreign country. They almost speak English, but they don't. Mm. So literally, it's almost like a universalism. I don't like the word New World Order because I think that's a conspiracy theory. But I do believe there are people floating around Europe. The Kinnocks are a prime example of that, whereas the Kinnocks probably spent the 70s when they were radicals saying we're going to abolish the House of Lords, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, opposing the EU in the 1975 referendum, and then floating to the top, and I'm not going to use the obvious here, but floating to the top and living off the EU without paying tax, because all people who work for the EU they're in a fortunate position, of which all us libertarians would like to be in, of not paying tax to a statutory body. And then their son, Stephen, bless his little cotton socks, never had a job, evaded taxes in his wife's country of Denmark, where he was married to the Prime Minister of Denmark. And when somebody actually calls them the Red Princes, we have created, out of the democracies that were established between, 1834, when we had the Great Reform Act, to the end of the Second World War, we've created a new aristocracy. The converse side of that is that the rest of us, as Hayek actually predicted in 1944, have been reduced to the role of serfs, where we have to work for 6 months of every year to keep these people in bread, butter, Jaguars and private jets. I believe that's wrong. I'm absolutely staggered where people have actually accepted this as the new normalcy, which has only actually happened in my lifetime of 60 years ago. I'm staggered.
Well, I mean, the road to serfdom has actually proved a prophetic text, which I don't think any of us can quite believe.
Great question, David. I know you have a question. Have you read it?
Yeah. I'm a Nozick boy, you know that.
It's horrific.
Yeah.
Literally every page, every word has come to pass.
Horrifically so. I mean, that's the appropriate word, horrifically. I mean, Andrew, you know my views because we discussed it. Liberty for me is the cornerstone of every civic virtue. Even a little reflection reveals that, because everything tumbles down domino-like without that. Why are people not crowding the streets defending it?
Well, from what I understand, there was an almost near riot at Speaker's Corner this afternoon, where literally hundreds of people congregated to hear Mr. Tommy, I want to say Tommy Walsh, but doesn't he do things? But you know who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, I'm a bit disturbed about that. I understand the outpouring of angst and anger about the whole thing. But when you have a rabble-rouser actually becoming the star of the show, we all know where that ended up in 1933. And to be quite honest, this sounds very pompous and very middle class and the rest of it. Saner and more rational minds and heads have actually got to hold sway here.
Well, admittedly, I mean, when demagogues start being in the right, we're on a very slippery wicket. I mean, before I drag Paul in, there's just one more question I want your reflections on, your feedback on. I mean, how are they getting away, the powers that be? And we all know who, I'm not the conspiracy boy, but Paul can maybe flesh that out a little. The powers that be being Parliament and the financial elite with a political agenda. How are they getting away, do you think, with closing down whole arenas of discourse? I suppose that's what I can't get my head around, because they're being so successful. How is that happening, Andrew?
Right, you're now talking to a historian, and I can tell you exactly when it started happening. It started happening on the 14th of June, 1645. What date was that, David?
Oh, offhand, I can't recall.
The Battle of Naseby is when we had... which is when we had the transfer of sovereignty from the Crown to Parliament.
Yeah.
The net result is we are one of 4 countries that has not got a constitution that protects the individual. We're just one of 4. So that's Great Britain, Canada, Israel, and New Zealand. We have no constitutional rights. We have no rights as individuals. The sole constitutional rights, the sole constitution of this country resides in 3 words. Parliament is sovereign. And to underline this, and I have furious arguments with, and I'm sorry, I'm going to call them the crazies, who say, oh, we've got this right under Magna Carta and we've got that right under the Bill of Rights from 1688. What these people don't realise is from about 1850 through to about 1880, statutory law virtually wiped out all of the articles of Magna Carta. They were eradicated from the statute book. So we have now got to a situation where we have actually got a very minor group of people who all know each other, all went to school, all shake each other's hands, that are the government of this country. They make up... It doesn't matter that 17 million people voted for Brexit. It really doesn't matter, because the civil service under Sir Jeremy Hayward drafted that referendum that it was advisory. Parliament has no need to take slightest bit of notice of this. They would be damn foolish, as Lord Lawson said, to ignore that, but it's an advisory vote. So of all the people in this country, just 650 people's vote count. Now, when people say to me, oh, that's ridiculous, you don't know what you're talking about, I just immediately email them or put it on social media or whatever. I send them the judgment from January the 23rd, 2017 by the Supreme Court of this country, which confirms Parliament is sovereign. Nothing can happen in relation to Brexit or to anything else without the consent of Parliament. That is where the locus of power lies. Those people in Parliament are not obligated to the rest of us, which is the reason why the Libertarian Party for the last 10 years has campaigned vigorously for constitutional change, for referenda to be binding on the Swiss model, to take power and break the power of Whitehall. That puts me on a list. It certainly has already put you on a list, David, as we were conversing earlier on today. Yeah. And basically, we are the dangerous radicals because we are subverting a constitution that has roughly worked for the last 400 years. That constitution is now breaking down, and every time a power is threatened, one of 2 things happens. As in 1989, the power of the Soviet state collapsed under its own inconsistencies, or you get repression. And what we're at now is at repression. It's not going to work, and it's not going to last long. But for people like us and people who are not part of the establishment, it's going to be a very bumpy and uncomfortable ride for the next 5 months. Hopefully, I will not be sharing a prison cell or in a re-education camp somewhere in Hampshire or the farthest stretches of Scotland. But who knows? Which way is it going to go?
Well, I hope we get the same prison cell, Andrew, because you're very fine company. And, you know, people forget that Parliament is sovereign, can cut two ways. I'm really pleased you brought that out. Paul, I mean, Andrew and I are just worried sick about the lack of a written constitution. I think it's becoming clear, very, very clear why. What's your take on all of this? What do you think of the discussion so far?
Well, I'd like to add, I mean, when you brought up the Met Police guidelines earlier on, I mean, listen to this. This is a quote taken from what they've actually said. By the way, hi, Andrew. So I'm bowling straight in there. Yeah. Good to have you back on again. Yeah, this is actually a quote, straight quote from it. It's, if someone does something that isn't a criminal offence, but the victim or anyone else believes it was motivated by prejudice or hate, we would class that as a hate incident, though what the perpetrator has done may not be against the law, their reasons for doing so are. Now that to me, in other words, means if we think that if we want to think that you're a hateful person that's doing a crime, we've got the right to do that, and that's just chilling. And also, what I'd like to touch on as well is when you speaking about the universities in California. To me, that just rings of the Frankfurt School, critical theory and cultural Marxism. I think people really need to research what the critical theory is, because we've all grown with these institutions with so much power, especially from America, like you were saying, and it's a lot of, especially the younger people growing up now, it just seems normal, all these ideas and the real social constructs that have come about over the last 30, 40, 50 years, and people don't really know where it's come from. I think if people can research that stuff a little bit more, it at least gives them an understanding that we've actually, our mindsets and the way we look at life and culture and our countries and the world is it's kind of been it's an indoctrination. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think it's just a conspiracy, or do you think there's a lot to that?
No, I mean, I'm fully behind that, but I'm not a conspiracist. I actually go by proven facts, proven historical documentation, because that's where I come from. Gramsci, who is an Italian Marxist, saw in the 1920s and 30s, with the growth of fascism, which conversely is a left-wing worship of the state, he actually saw that there was never going to be an armed revolution on the model that Marx said that there was going to be, leading to the, what's the word I'm actually looking for? What's the proletariat, David? Just remind me.
Well, the proletariat...
Dictatorship of the proletariat.
Yeah.
So he saw that was never going to happen. So literally what he said was, for Marxists and people of the left to bring forward a revolution, they had to seize the high points of the media, of culture, of theatre, of film, of universities, and most especially state broadcasting institutions. I think we're quite happy to all concur that the BBC has actually fallen that way. And even George Orwell, when he was working there in the propaganda department of the BBC in the 1940s, he based the Ministry of Truth on what he saw. MI5 operatives are inside. It's an open secret where their office is. MI5 operatives are in there acting on direct instruction from the government as to what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, what will be broadcast and what will not be broadcast. That is a documented historical fact going back over 60 years. I'm not making that up. That's a historical fact. You can have a look in any of the Reith, when they were negotiating to get their charter so to tax us for even possessing a TV set. These were all part of the negotiations. It's a documented fact.
Yeah.
It's not a conspiracy theory. It happened.
Yeah.
And you can go and look at it in black and white. So literally, where the Conservative government, which I actually now sadly say, I don't think they are a Conservative government, they are a left-wing government, they've embraced communitarianism wholesale. You just examine and deconstruct any of Theresa May's speeches. She talked about the common good. The last time I heard the common good was in an amazing film which was filmed not far from around here where I'm sitting in Somerset, called Hot Fuzz, where you've actually got all these people who are on the town council, and I've got a group talking about the greater good in almost apocalyptic terms, that they are the deciders of what is good for the community. And I recommend anybody to watch that film because it's a parody of where we are at the moment. And literally, you've actually got the police here, and they're actually having to open fire and stage a mini revolution in the city of Wales. So it's not only is it a good storyline and good fun and everything else, it's actually got a serious underlying message. Part of that is the fact that it's all the economic powers that you were saying about the power of corporate finance. Corporate finance and the banks and everything else find it very easy just to go to a small group of people that they actually know, like Gordon Brown, and they're all in the same group that were all excluded from in the Westminster bubble, that as soon as they actually had carried out all their criminal activity back in the 80s and 90s and bankrupted bank assets that had been built up over 200 years, the first place they went running off to was the state. And the first thing the state did was give them our grandchildren's money. Not my money, not my son's money, but my grandchildren. They borrowed it off my grandchildren who've got no vote, no say. But like the Second World War, which I probably over my working lifetime paid off, because we paid the war debt to America, finally was paid off in 2006. I was paying for events that happened before I was even born, and that's the stage we're at now.
Yeah.
It's the two most successful countries. The one that the Libertarian Party focuses on is Switzerland, but one of the other most successful countries in the world, and stays within its budget and has actually got a financial limit on what governments can borrow, is Botswana. I mean, a Central African country is extremely successful and has actually got a constitution that forbids it to borrow money. Now, I'm actually going to throw something into the arena here which will absolutely astound anybody who's been brought up on the macroeconomics that we've had over the last 50 years in this country. The Swiss government have a major problem, is they haven't spent all their money. They're in surplus on current account tax revenue. So the debate that's going on in Switzerland at the moment is, do we give everybody a refund or do we just put it on deposit?
I mean, it is a comfortable place to live.
Can you imagine that happening in this country where we've got a 1.6 trillion debt?
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, from my point of view, is, I mean, I'm at heart, there's a part of me that's very libertarian in terms of I believe in liberty, I believe in freedom, freedom of speech, as we've been talking about. But also, I'm not completely opposed to the idea of socialism in terms of the thing is, I think whatever system it is, you've got to be a tightly united society that all, even if you've got your differences within it, generally all want to move in the same direction. I think and this is why I personally oppose, not necessarily oppose immigration if it's sensible and done right, but I don't think multiculturalism is a way forward for society, because ultimately you're having so much division within it. You're not all going in the same direction, and all these ideas, be it socialism, be it libertarianism, ultimately first you need to protect a society before you can really give it a direction of how it flourishes and so on. I mean, what's your views on that with the multiculturalism?
Well, I would actually stand that on its head. I'm actually saying all the problems that we're having with immigration, and we do need skilled people to come into this country, is that socialism has actually got us to the point where we have a Ponzi finance scheme for welfare, which actually relies on the next generation, the generation after that, to actually fund the people like me who have actually gone through the system. And all of the taxes I've paid have been spent keeping the previous generation going. Now, we have a smaller tax base now, and we're not breeding as much as we have. So the socialist thought back under Blair and Brown was, let's import lots of people who are going to be net contributors to the exchequer. Unfortunately, they haven't been. They have actually come here hoping to have a better life, which is perfectly logical, perfectly understandable, but they've brought their own cultural mores with them. And that's where the friction is actually happening. And literally, instead of actually being net contributors, they are actually net drain on resources like schools, like health service and everything else, because we were geared up to have, this is the reason why we used to have census, which if you notice now, we don't do them anymore after 150 years. And it's a great shame for future historians, because literally the truths that are actually being brought forward in a modern day census would actually horrify the public.
Oh, yeah.
So literally you've got socialism, and taking your point about having a unified country, Nazi Germany was unified, Soviet Russia was unified. It doesn't mean that everybody agreed with the way the countries were going. They just daren't speak out in case they were shot.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, a healthy country is one that can have a healthy debate. But you can only have a healthy debate if you all share the same moral, same culture and everything else. And unfortunately, we've actually now got ourselves into a position where we haven't got a uniform society anymore.
Not at all.
Now, that's probably going to get a finger pointed at me and said, there you go, I told you he was a Nazi.
Well, to be honest, I give up on those kind of people anymore, because I think generally the vast majority of the country, I'll just roll their eyes with that stuff anymore. A lot of them are afraid to speak out because of it. It's intimidated by it. But I think generally they respect people that speak their minds and say stuff like the truth, because it's just getting ridiculous now. It's like, if you mention the word white people, then you're a white supremacist. If you mention the word nationalism, you're a Nazi. And politically, if you're to the right of Stalin, then you're like some sort of right-wing extremist. And it's interesting. I don't know where it's going to go, because people are only going to keep waking up to it. And it's, I just hope we don't really turn into an authoritarian country, because that, it seems to me that's the only way they're going to be able to maintain what they're doing, is by just really.
Lord Lawson was the one who stood up in the House of Lords and said, "You overturn Brexit and you don't control the borders, the country will be rendered ungovernable." And I think the events at Speaker's Corner this afternoon is the first spark.
Yeah.
It's up to the government. They can either control this and deal with it sensibly, or they can carry on with more repression. The more repression there is, there's only 650 MPs, there's 67 million of us. So it's not going to end happily, whichever way it goes.
I agree with you.
One of the other things, if I can just interrupt here, is that one of the things that actually sort of came up, which actually shows the split in the English-speaking liberal world, is the fact that last week a South African white farming family actually applied for political asylum in Canada after the implicit policy statement by the South African ANC government. They're going to seize land without compensation, going down a very tricky path that was actually trod by Comrade Bob. Now, literally, the Trudeau government, who I have to say, Canadians, and I've worked there, I've got nothing but the greatest respect. But how the heck they've actually come to end up somebody who's a flower power child like Justin Trudeau beats me. So directly, I understand he's intervened. Their visa has been refused. They're going to be deported back to South Africa. Within 3 days, the Australian government said they're going to fast track white farmers' visa applications from South Africa. Now, the inevitability of that is when there's been 70,000 white farmers killed since majority rule, people are going to be queuing up at the doors to go. I work a lot in South Africa. It's a country I love. I think the people are fantastic. But I think we now have to say, with the passing of this new policy, the ANC, and this is not going to be popular, are a racist party. Racism works one of two ways. It isn't a one-way street that all white people are racist and black people are not. Literally, that policy, by any definition, is a racist one, because it's directed at white farmers. Now, I've seen some of the photographs when I was down in South Africa, of victims of these assaults on the farms with, the most horrific one, it's absolutely stomach churning, but being as we're all protected from this by the BBC, of a white woman hanging upside down by her ankles who'd been raped and gutted from a rafter. Until they start showing that stuff on primetime media, everybody's going to go around still thinking that the Rainbow Nation of Nelson Mandela still exists.
No, not at all.
Now, until the ANC turn over that racist policy, the Rainbow Nation is dead. And I really hope for my colleagues and friends, black and white, in South Africa, that the Democratic Alliance actually wins the next election, because they're on a slippery slope.
Well, yeah, I mean, this draws back to Lauren Southern, who was banned from the UK. It just so happens that she's been out South Africa filming, doing a documentary, and I urge people to check out Lauren Southern's channel on YouTube to see some of this. And it's just, yeah, I mean, it's I know there's been a political upheaval down there, there's situations going on, but there's human rights being abused big time over there at the moment. Not just the murders, but the displacement and the they're just not helping them. They're grinding them down. And yeah, check out that. And I'm a bit ashamed that our government has not only not mentioned anything about it, but banning a woman to come into the country that's doing a documentary about it. You know, it's this country is always sympathetic to all sorts of problems.
My first statement, Parliament is sovereign, and in the wake of the First World War in 1919, they actually passed an act to stop people coming into this country. There is currently a right that we can all speak our mind, as long as we don't get beaten up by Antifa or having meetings broken up. But for any alien, and the Canadian, as Lauren Southern is, has no right. And in fact, the Home Secretary, Amber Rudd, has got the right to exclude her from the country.
Is that the same?
Right given to her by Parliament.
But is that the same because she's part of the Commonwealth? Does that change anything? Or
no, she's an alien. She's a Canadian alien.
All right. Well, there you go, David. What do you make of this?
She gives her allegiance to the Queen.
Yeah.
Because if you have a look at her Lauren Southern's Canadian passport, it says the Queen, as the head of state, wishes the assistance of the lawful authorities of such and such a country to help my Canadian citizen. So she's got allegiance to the Queen, and yet she's excluded from the Queen's principal dominion. Ridiculous.
Yeah, terrible.
Well, I mean, we're beginning to draw an end to the show. I mean, it's all horrific. I never thought when I was a young whippersnapper we'd ever be having conversations like this. I mean, the country's already authoritarian. It's not becoming more authoritarian. It is already authoritarian. It depends how far we want to go into that. Jeremy Bentham and utilitarianism, Andrew, is that really the underlying model of what's going on?
No, I mean, what's going on at the moment is that politically, and because we're now in a situation where none of us have got any rights, literally there's a power battle going on in Parliament and inside the Conservative Party. May is completely finished, so this little foray of Russians under the beds and everything else is all part of, look at me, I'm the new Thatcher. And unfortunately, when I have to go into print and say, I agree with Jeremy Corbyn, show me the proof, I think things are coming to a poor pass. I'm actually agreeing with Jeremy Corbyn. Literally, what is actually clamping down now is, with it going on, is in the hands of Amber Rudd, who's an acolyte and a protege of Theresa May. She is desperate to be the next Prime Minister. And literally, she's showing the firm smack of government here, and that's what's going on. And such time as everybody in this country who's in opposition to the current setup sinks their differences and has a constitutional conference where communists, whereas fascists, whereas liberals, whereas UKIP people can have a vote in Parliament that actually reflects their support in the country, this is going to continue, and it will come to pass that I was going to say there'll be blood on the streets, which is what I actually predicted 3 years ago, but it's already happened. Yeah,
it's already happened. Paul, we need to round off. Any last questions?
Well, no, I think that's it's been great speaking with you again, Andrew, and obviously I think as this year unfolds, there's going to be a lot to talk about. I mean, there's the whole Russian thing that's cooking up as well that we haven't even touched on today, but perhaps I mean, you're always welcome to come on, and we always have a great chat. So is there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap it up?
No, I think I've bored everybody enough with my
Okay, so, well, let's wrap that up then. And thanks again. And listeners, let us know what you thought about this one. And till the next time, Andrew, we'll be speaking with you again soon.
Thanks a lot, Paul. Thanks a lot, David.
That was Andrew Withers. Great having him back on, wasn't it, David? And lots of serious things to think about there.
Well, I mean, he's a friend to the show. He's a friend to both of us on a personal level anyway. You know, he's a highly trained historian. He's a social commentator and still an active politician. What worries me about all of it are the unnamed victims here. You know, there was a feminist commentator the other day, and I don't want to get into that because it's completely off topic, who was saying she was willing to bear the burden of people's crushed lives provided the principle was carried through. And there's too much of that type of thinking at the minute. Whose principles and what are they about? You know, we're beginning to forget the individual and the basic irony of modern times. We're forgetting the value of the individual in this desperate rushing cascade for party politics and domination. What disturbs me, Paul, is the fact they're closing down debate. That simply cannot be healthy.
There's too many people sitting back and just watching as well. I mean, that's one thing, coming back to the good old David Icke, is one of the things he said is, you know, if the whole reason, the power that these people have that they're doing them is the power we give them. And I think we're just so giving them the power at the moment. I mean, you've got these little ignorant groups like Antifa that are on the street bullying people on the street, and they're a bunch of idiots. And when you think of this country, and it's their groups like that are sort of keeping it at bay at the moment, really. I mean, I think if most people just stood up and said, look, we want our free speech, this is nonsense, it's got to stop, that's an incredible, powerful reaction. But I think people are still sleeping. They've got to wake up, and they've got to wake up quick, I think.
Well, I mean, the trouble is people in this country still think they've got free speech, which they actually haven't had for some time.
Yeah.
And, you know, the Antifa people, I'm sure a lot of them are very well motivated.
Oh, I don't know about
Well, I do think that. But the point is they're young, they're inexperienced, and they think shouting takes the place of discussion and discourse.
Well, that's it.
I mean, how can, and that's because they're inexperienced youth.
But their goal is to shut down free speech. This is it. I've never sat down, I've never spoken with someone from Antifa that has a diplomatic ideology of what exactly they want. All they want to do is just destroy political opposition. And I've tried, but I can't. I'm not. The thing is, it's important we clarify that far left people aren't all Antifa. I mean, I know a few people that you'd describe as communists or perhaps Soviets. They prefer to use themselves as Soviets, old-fashioned Soviets, and they're actually a lot more diplomatic. Completely disagree with them politically, but they're actually got a way about them. They'll debate, and they have got an argument, and they'll put it across. These Antifa types, they're more, I don't know, I think they're just what we were talking about earlier with Andrew, is the cultural Marxists, the Frankfurt School, the critical theory. They're the ultimate victims of that, and it's an emptiness. I think it's just this emptiness that just wants to attack anything that's got structure, destroy it, don't listen. You can't interview them. It's all over YouTube. You go with them with a mic and you say, what is it you want? And they push you, I don't want to talk. And that's just very dangerous, and people don't want to confront that. I mean, I don't particularly think they are dangerous. Any movement like that, if they grow big enough, they can be dangerous. But it's ultimately it's just bullying. It's state, the state fund these sort of groups through people like Soros, and I think even the Labour Party through certain different avenues have managed to more or less fund them. And it's almost like they're getting them to do the job of the police, where the police just sit back and let people violently disrupt something or smash a venue up so they close it down. But anyway, maybe we'll disagree on that.
I mean, those are completely other shows, so I don't want to get into that at the moment, although we do need to tackle them at some point. I mean, what I want to say is both you and I have asked Antifa to come on this show. I have personally invited them to speak at the Free Speech Club. So far, we've been greeted with a resounding silence, but let's renew that.
I'm always open.
Let's renew our call for open discussion and debate if these people really have something to say.
Always open for that. I don't think it will, and I don't, and that's reason why I have little respect for them. But if one of them does say, okay, you want to hear what we're all about, we're absolutely open. And again, here's an invitation that goes out. So if anyone's listening and wants to, come on and we'll talk about it. We'll even talk about what you think we're doing here on the show and why you might think we're the enemy or whatnot. It's open debate and dialogue is the way forward. But with that, I think we do have to wrap up. Is there anything you'd like to quickly add, David?
Not really. I think we need to leave it there with that invitation.
Yeah.
Apart from that, I'm looking forward to future shows.
Great. And thank you all for listening. We'll be back again very soon with some more interesting guests. And also, don't forget to check our THA Thoughts article page for more interesting stuff coming out there. Till the next time, take care. Keep linking the show. Keep telling your friends about the show. And more importantly, keep downloading the show. We'll be seeing you again real soon. Take care. Bye.
Chelsea.